Welcome to our video on arrays and C strings within C++. And first, let's dive into arrays. So let's set up our IDE. Let's include iomanib. Let's include string. And finally, let's use namespace std. And let's get rid of this extra code right here. So first, let's talk about arrays. So arrays are a common data structure that are used to store data within C++. And let's start off with listing some key elements or characteristics of arrays. So first, they have a stable size. So let's say you declare it as having 7 slots, then you cannot change it from 7 to 5 slots. However, you can alter what's within the array, and you can also leave some blank. You don't have to have 7. And then secondly, only one variable type is allowed. So only one variable type is allowed. So let's say you had one full of strings. You cannot somehow include integer in it unless you turn an integer to a string. And similarly for integers, you cannot have booleans within your integer array. But one exception is floats. If you have a float array, you could put integers into them because integers can be turned into floats automatically by your IDE, not the other way around. And lastly, the indices start counting from 0. So let's say you had 5 slots. The indices or subpositions or even positions start from 0. So it'd be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the max index of an array is always the length minus 1. So if you try calling the index of 5, the fifth index, because that's the length, you'll get an error because it starts counting from 0 and the max index will be 4. So let's see how you can declare some arrays. So this means that you just put it inside the program's memory as a location, but you don't really have any values assigned to it. So the way you do that is the data type of the elements, which has to be one singular type. We have the array name, and then we have in brackets the array size. So how many slots do you want? And then a semicolon at the end. So some examples, float student grades, and let's say we have 10 students in the class, put 10, and then we put a semicolon. Boolean, so Boolean true or false statements or responses, and let's say we have 15 of them. And then characters, that's another type of variable. So letters in alphabet, and they're 26. And then let's say integer ages, and then we set that equal to 10. So that's how we declare some arrays within C++. So the other type is called initializing, and that means we set the values to an array. And there are 3 ways that we can do this. So let's get rid of these examples. And the first way, so let's say way 1, is data type of the elements, or it's the data type of the elements, yeah, data type of the elements, and then it's the array name, and then it's the array size, like we mentioned previously, array size, and then the same number of values as the array size separated by commas. So we got values, all values separated by commas. So an example of this, float student grades, and we have 5 is equal to, let's say, 199 or 100.5, 99.6, 47.8, 85.6, and then that's 4, so we have to have one more, and let's say 78.9. So those will be our arrays, and we have to have a semicolon at the end of it. And let's say another one, integer digits, and we have 10 digits, so let's say that, and put the brackets, or the curly brackets, not the normal brackets. So change this to a curly bracket, and this to a curly bracket. We have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So that's the way number 1. Now let's take a look at way number 2, and it's somewhat similar. So we have the data type, then we have array name, and then we have array size, and then we have all the values which are less than or equal to the size of the array. So let's say we have less, so the size of the array, that number of values. So let's say we have integer, we have the example of Boolean, a bool, true or false, right? And we set the size equal to 4. Let's say we only have true, false, true. This will still work fine, even though we don't have 4 values. That just means our third index, which is the length minus 1, because it starts counting from 0, 0, 1, 2, and then 3, will be left as empty, null, or if it's a integer, right? If it's an integer or float string, it'll be set as equal to 0. So there's no need to worry that you have less than how many you specify. And sometimes it's actually better if you don't know all the values. So again, let's say we have integer digits and we have 10 digits and we just put 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we don't fill out the rest. That's completely fine. And then let's look at the last way. Let's delete these two, or these two examples. Way 2, and let's look at way 3 now. Way 3. So that's gonna be the data type. So a pattern that we saw is we always include the data type, and then we have the array name, and we have equal, and then we have number of values. So we have blank brackets, and we just have values. So here's some examples. So float int digits, and then we just put empty brackets, and we put 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Then we, by default, set the length of digits equal to 10, and it can't be changed from 10. It could be less than, but it can never be greater. And these are the values that it sorts itself as. So that's a specific rule that we have to know about this. The size will be set to 10. So let's take another example. Boolean true or false, and we set that equal to false. Then the size will always be 1. It could always either be true or it could always be false. There's nothing else that you can do. So now that we know how to initialize and declare arrays, now let's see how we can actually access the elements within the array, because what's the point of storing them if we can't do anything with them? And like we said before, this has to do with indices. And remember, they start counting with 0 and not 1. So the way that we actually access an element is through this syntax. So it's the name of the array, and then in brackets, the index you want to see, index you want to get. So in this example, let's say we wanted to get the number 2. That would start at index 0, so it'd be 0, 1, 2. So we would do digits, and then we would do 2. And then if we see out, then we should get 2. Or true or false. And we forgot a semicolon here, so that's why I said it's an error. But yeah, it gives us 2. So remember that it always starts with 0. So if we try true or false 1, if we started counting from 1, it would give us a syntax error because that does not even exist. But if we tried 0, we would get false. And it's important to realize that 0 is the same thing as false. So now let's go to another example, which let's say that we wanted to change elements within the array. So this is a pretty similar syntax, and the way you do that is through the name of the array, the index you want to change, and then an equal sign, and then the new value. So let's say we wanted to change true or false 0 to true. The way that we do that is true or false 0 equal to true. Similarly for digits, if you wanted to change the 9th index to 10, then that's the way you would do. And let's see out digits 9 to see if that change actually happened. If it's still 9, that means it didn't work. If it's 10, that means it works. And as we can see, it works. So that's what there is to say about arrays in C++. So now let's talk about C strings within C++. So that's basically converting a string, which we talked about in an earlier video as a word, into an array of all of its different characters. So let's look at an example. Let's say we had the word hello as a string. As a C string, it would look like this. We would have H in single quotes because characters are in single quotes. E, L, L, and then O. That's what a C string would look like of hello. And there are three different ways to actually determine or initialize a C string. But before that, it's important to note that spaces and punctuation are included as characters within C++. So if I had a hello space and then an exclamation mark, here's what the C string would look like. It would have a space here, and then it would add an exclamation mark as well. And remember, it's single quotes, not double quotes. So now let's talk about how we can initialize these arrays. So the first way is through first the keyword car, and we put empty, then we put the name of the array, and then we put empty brackets, and then we write out all of the letters separated by commas, inside the curly brackets. And we already have an example of this right here. So let's say car or character, yeah, hello is equal, and then empty brackets is equal to this. This is how we initialize a C string of this word hello. So what's important to realize is, like in the earlier example, the size is now set to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's no more than 7 characters allowed in the C string, but it could be like 5 or 6, but not 8. So that's the first way. For the second way, you can just utilize a string. So we've kind of done that here too, but character and then the name of the array, and then we have empty brackets, and then we have a word inside of double brackets, which indicate a string. So let's say we wanted to put character hello way2 is equal to this. This is how we would initialize the same array as we had below. The same C string that we had here, that's the result of this. And again, we left this size empty, but the size is always going to be set to 7 now because there's only 7 characters available. Now for the third way, it's actually the most complex, but it's character and then the name of the array, and then in here we have the size of how many letters we have plus 1, and then we have our letters here separated by commas, or characters separated by commas. So what's especially important to realize is at the end of a C string, there's something called a null terminator, which tells the computer that that's the end of that line. But this null terminator takes up a space. So let's say we had the word hello, then at the end of that, there'll be a null terminator. So let's just write null here. So the real space you have is 1, or the size of it will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, even though there's only 5 letters. And let's say you forget to account for this. Well, it wouldn't really debug your code, but let's say you put the size as 5 instead of 6, it would just be hell and then null because it needs a null terminator to know when to stop. So all in all, you do not have to worry about this too much because if you use methods 1 and 2, it'll automatically put the null terminator for you. But if you're doing it solo or manually, like in the third option, then you have to account for it. So thank you for watching this video on arrays and C strings within C++, and I hope you learned something new.